So hi everybody, and thank you for tuning in to Soul Chat with me, Angie Latham. And this week I'm talking to a friend and fellow therapist, Leon Facey, and he's based in Herefordshire in the UK. And so he's a clinical hypnotherapist and a regression therapist, a spirit release practitioner, inner child therapist, and life between lives practitioner. And that's mainly what we'll be talking about today. What interests me about you, Leon, is that you're kind of traditionally trained in psychotherapy and those sort of more traditional ways of working, but also you bring the spiritual in as well, so the past life regression and the life between lives. So I'm really interested in talking to people that are kind of bridging that scientific traditional way of working and with the spiritual. It's funny that I should say traditional way of working, because actually the spiritual way of working is the traditional way of working, isn't it? And the kind of
it started with shamanism, I suppose you could say.
Yes, really just going back to the ancient knowledge, with a lot of this sort of more spiritual awareness. So I'd really like to talk to you about the life between lives, because that's how we met, because I came for a life between life therapy session with you, and I think it was about 5 or 6 hours long, wasn't it? It was quite a long one, I think. Yeah. But I mean, it really changed the direction in my life, gave me so much confirmation and validity, but also like some surprising things came up that my ego mind, my conscious mind wouldn't have accepted, but because I was under deep hypnosis, I know that what I was saying was really true for me, without any of the kind of ego or limiting beliefs sort of getting in the way. So that was really interesting, even though, you know, coming back round in a few days afterwards, that logical side of my brain started to creep in and overanalyze again. But because, that was 3 years ago, and actually so much has happened to validate what was said in that session, that actually, I now really trust that information that I got through was correct. So yeah, it really helped me in my sort of path, and part of the reason why I'm here now. And so lots of people are familiar with past life regression and past life regression therapy. How does past life regression differ from life between lives? It's kind of taking it to the next level, isn't it? So,
well, there are similarities in the sense of how it's experienced in the actual session, because I'm asking questions and inquiring and trying to understand what the experience is, and they're relaying to me what their experiences are. But what comes to mind first about one of the main differences is with a past life regression, it tends to just run. So I will, depending on how it unfolds, or depend on how I guide the person through the different scenes of the past life, so it can be understood, and we can make sense of the life and what it means to somebody. But with life between lives, there can be a variation on how it unfolds. So a session could be, it could unfold in a formatted way, in the sense that there's a common way that people go through the light realms from death to birth, and how that's experienced. And that's been really nicely outlined by the work that Michael Newton has done and written in his books. And some people, I've experienced clients that this all comes out, and they may never have even come across Michael Newton's work, and the way they describe the spirit realm and the experiences they have are very, very similar, and the way it all goes. But then, because we're working in the spirit realm, and the spirit realm is of now time as opposed to linear time. So linear time would be your past lives, your current life is in linear time, because you've got past, present, and future. It's all relevant, and everything is subject to deterioration as a result of that. In the spirit realm, it's now time. So because it's now time, and it's about now time that we're working through, we can switch into this mode of working in the spirit realm. So somebody could be reconnecting with a soul group, reconnecting with their spirit guides, but we can then start to converse with them in real time. It moves from it being re-experiencing a memory to actually having an interaction with the light beings or the soul group members. And that sometimes can be a really powerful session, because there can be some really deep understandings that come from that. So while Life Between Lives isn't a therapy as such, it can be very, very therapeutic because of this, because people can understand their life purpose on a deeper level. And when you get information from your spirit guides and you're in a trance, that information can be deeply integrated. So then your knee-jerk reaction in everyday life is influenced by that information. When we learn something from our spirit guides through a medium and we're told it on a conscious level, that's like really, it can be really helpful, really useful, but it doesn't necessarily change how we respond in situations when we don't think about our response, which is a lot of the time what happens, you know.
Yeah.
So that can be a really powerful thing in a Life Between Lives. I mean, that does happen in past life regression as well, because in a past life regression, at the end of the life, there is this opportunity to then transform the situation. So the trauma or the relationships with the perpetrators or whatever it is, there's an opportunity then to work through it and heal, so that we can then
I think that's an important point to talk about, actually, because when I'd had past life regression sessions before the Life Between Life session, it was generally more not so much therapy, but just kind of like out of interest to sort of like, have I lived before? Is reincarnation a thing? And if so, you know, how have I experienced other lives? And I think I think that was what most people were kind of intrigued and interested about a few years ago. But what I've noticed in the last few years is that people are far more interested in using past life regression to actually find out, you know, their fears, their phobias, their anxiety, where things that are impacting them in this life now, how that may have been seeded by a past life experience. So and you, that's really what you do, isn't it, with your past life? So it's really past life regression therapy, rather than just a nice little trip to see whether you were Cleopatra or King Arthur.
Many times people come out of curiosity, and you know, they're, I don't know, being persecuted as a witch in the past life. Well, we can't just leave that with them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we need to process it. Yeah. So it becomes.
Yeah, I have experienced that myself, where, you know, where the person that was doing the past life regression did kind of leave you there, because they'd only really learned the technique to take somebody back, but hadn't really learned about how to work through the therapy side of it. So I think that's really important to bring up, I think, because anybody can call themselves a past life. You know,
this is. But to be fair, there's something I should add at this point, which is an interesting area, is the higher mind or the higher self of the client. There is, to a degree, will only go into a past life that the practitioner can potentially handle, or that they could handle over time. And I can talk about this in this way because I know that when I first started out years ago doing past life regression, the clients were going into stuff that was nowhere near as big as the stuff clients go into now. But no matter what a client goes into, I can help them work through it, and it's all good. But if I'd have had those experiences years ago, I wouldn't have known what to do, and I'd be like, "Oh my God, what do I do with this?" You know. So there is an area of the higher mind knows what the practitioner's capabilities are. I'm pretty convinced of that. But that being said, you're right. There is an area that one does need to consider, that if they know how to hypnotize somebody, and they give the instruction for someone to go to a past life, and they go to past life and they're being, you know, it might be that they have a trauma that's just below the surface, and they take them into a past life, and that trauma comes out, and they're being run through on a battlefield or pulled to bits in a torture chamber or something like that. It's like, what do they do with that? You know, that can happen.
Yeah.
But it's less likely to happen because the higher mind does hold back. But you can't. I don't think you can use that as a guarantee. So
yeah, I mean, do you think that I mean, it's important, isn't it, for the practitioner to have the right intent, isn't it?
Yes.
For the highest good of
yes.
the client.
The intention is a big,
yes,
big part of it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think that even if somebody was led to a practitioner who didn't really know what they were doing, then that in itself can be a lesson for the client, because it kind of teaches you discernment, and it maybe teaches you to really feel whether you know, maybe that client was already feeling like they weren't sure whether this was the right sort of person to go to, but because of their, you know, popularity or likes on Facebook or whatever, they thought that they were. Do you know what I mean? So I think there is always, isn't there, whatever we experience, that kind of lesson, that learning for both parties. So but I think you're right as well. There is definitely a co-creation going on between our spirit team and the client spirit team to make sure that whatever needs to be learned is learned. And so
and this is I see this in Life Between Lives as well, where some people come to me for a Life Between Lives, and the access of the spirit realm and the access to who they are as a soul is shut off to them, and that can be done by their guides. So it can be that they're at a stage in their life where it's inappropriate for them to learn certain aspects about themselves because it would interfere with their current life activities. So the guides are actively assisting and holding space from the other side as well with this work. That's definitely clear there.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, you know, yours was the first Life Between, the first kind of really deep session that I had, and that was back in 2018. And I've had a couple of sessions since that time where the information that's come out in those sessions have kind of, you know, have been really kind of off the wall in a lot of ways, where and I've often thought to myself, well, why didn't I get that in, you know, when I went to Leon, the first one? But actually, of course, it was like, because my mind, I wasn't ready to accept that information then. It just wasn't the right timing for me to access that amount of information. I would have either dismissed it outright, or, you know, it would have really challenged
distracted from what we were.
Yes. So it's really helped. That first session that I had with you was just, you know, the little breadcrumb that then left to another breadcrumb and another breadcrumb and another breadcrumb. And by the time I had a Beyond Quantum Healing session, which is similar to a Life Between Lives, you know, I was ready to know more about myself as a soul than I was when I came to you. So I think that's amazingly clever how our higher self and our guides know exactly what to give you when, you know, to challenge you enough, you know, but also sort of like for your highest learning at that time. So
and I think we often don't give enough credit to our higher selves. Often we give our power away and say, oh, spirit have told me I should be doing this, or I've been advised this, or my guides are doing this for me. But often we don't actually consider how powerful we are as spirit, because we are spirit and we're just having a human experience at the moment. And our higher selves have a deep knowledge about all that we've experienced and all of our intentions, and that, I think, is commonly overlooked. You know, a lot of what is happening in our lives is down to us, and that realization, I think, can begin to be quite an empowering realization, because we can then start to realize that we are the powerful beings of light that we respect and we want to try and connect with, you know. It's just we've forgotten.
Yeah, yeah. So it's more about being more of ourselves as a soul, and begin and trusting our own knowledge, isn't it? Our own inner truth barometers, which we've all got. And the more heart-centered we can get, the easier that is. It's the clearer the information comes through. So can you speak a little bit about you know, why we get clearer answers and messages when we're kind of heart-centered, and we're not so much in that kind of ego mind, because that's where all the limited beliefs and the programming is, isn't it?
Well, one of the, I mean, I think I would say there's quite a few reasons that play into that, but one important aspect of it that comes to mind is the higher and low vibration. So when, I mean, a great example is when a loved one passes over and someone is grieving the loss of that loved one. When they're in that lower vibration of depression and sadness, it's very difficult for them to connect with their lost loved one, but yet that's all they want to do. Mm-hmm. And for the loved one that wants to connect with them, it's very difficult for them to lower their vibration to be able to connect with them. So when this is how come when we think of our loved ones with a light heart, when we think of joyous moments and happy times, our vibration is higher. Our heart is open, you know, that open heart that you speak of. And then it is much easier to connect with spirit, because then spirit don't have to lower their vibration that much to connect with us. So there's like this meeting in the middle, because living on the earth plane and living a human experience is a much lower vibration than what we have when we are in the light realms, when we're in our spirit selves.
Yeah.
So I thought that plays a big part to it.
And I think that explains why children are so open and love everything. You know, that to children, they are in so much wonder of the world, aren't they? They think they can do anything. They don't question anything. They you know, they are completely heart-led until they're taught otherwise from parents or teachers or, you know, cultural society around them. So
it's interesting you talk about children as well, because with children, it's also down to the conscious and subconscious mind as well. So I totally agree with what you say about how society and parents teach as children grow up, and children are told to, oh, don't be silly, there's no imaginary friend there and stuff like that. So well, there is, but obviously there's not, so we'll forget about it. But a big part of why, and this is the reason why a lot of children remember past lives, is up until the age of 3, most people don't have memory really of before that time. And this is largely because the subconscious mind is really the main functioning part of the mind, and the conscious mind then starts to develop, and it develops, and it isn't really fully developed until their teenage years. So while the subconscious mind is more the predominant state of mind, then there's easier access to connecting with energy, spirit, past lives, because this is how as a practitioner we help people connect with their past lives or connect with spirit or their guides, is by taking them into a trance, by bringing forward the subconscious. And so the subconscious mind comes forward and the conscious mind sits back here, and there we're able to connect. So if your subconscious mind is the predominant playing part of the mind that you're predominantly functioning with, then you're going to potentially be connecting with energy a lot easier anyway.
That's really good, because that really leads me into asking what is happening during a hypnosis session, a life between life session. So as in, you know, the conscious versus the unconscious mind, and how can we trust what we're getting, the information that we're getting when we're in that deep level of trance? because the ego mind will always want to come in and question things later, do they?
Yeah, and that shallows the trance. So
there is that need to let go and surrender by the client, isn't there?
Yeah, so I mean, you can access a past life in a fairly light trance, really, but when you're in a more light trance, there's more conscious interference and there's more doubt. When I say conscious interference, is the conscious mind can potentially be influencing the information you get. So the information you get is always you've always got to consider the possibility of conscious interference or coloring what comes through. The deeper the trance, the less likely that is going on, because there's less of the conscious mind involved. So the subconscious mind is the part of us that really is through which we access our soul, which we access the energy. If you're a medium is very good at having, step out of their own way and connect, because they're able to go into a trance. So all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So when we say hypnosis, it's about accessing through the subconscious. So the subconscious comes forward, and it's through that we're able to. So when we communicate with spirit, or when we connect with past life memory, it's largely the emotional vibration of that we're connecting with. So emotion, energy in motion, it's an energy, just like trauma is an energy. So when there's say with a past life, if there's an unresolved trauma, that's a very powerful energy. Yeah. So that can be a very, very strong link to a past experience. I mean, this is the same as if it's in childhood. It could be childhood. So we mentioned PTSD earlier when we were chatting. So that's a very powerful trance induction. So somebody has PTSD because of an experience they've had, and they could be going about their everyday life, and all of a sudden a noise or a smell or a certain situation or scenario will trigger the emotion of a traumatic event. So all of a sudden they're whipped back into that emotion, that emotional field, and they're overwhelmed with anxiety or fear. This is very much the same with a past life. So with past life, somebody could be taken to a past life through progressive relaxation and a guided meditation script, or they can be bridged. And when I say bridged, if somebody has a fear of something, a fear of, I can't think of, I've gone blank on what someone might have a fear of. That sounds crazy.
Snakes just came in. Snakes.
Snakes. Okay, so someone has a fear of snakes.
Or spiders.
And that fear started with a past life experience. Maybe they were tortured with snakes or stuck in a tomb or something like that. And so they have this really active, so anything like a snake, like a rolled up towel, it can trigger a fear. Okay, so that fear, that relationship could be a great way to bridge someone, because it takes someone into, so when we feel fear or powerful emotion, we go into a trance. It's hypnotic. So when somebody connects with that fear, and the practitioner knows what they're doing, and they can then guide that person in that fear to the source of where that fear came from and hold that space, bang, they're there. And all of a sudden, without hardly any hypnosis, you have a client that is actually so embodied in a past life experience, and they're a different sex, they're in a different country, totally, everything's totally different, and they're all of a sudden this roll of information is just falling out, and they're just expressing what's going on. And
so how do they? So how does taking somebody back to that time where, say, they're in a pit of snakes? I mean, just acknowledging that has happened isn't quite enough, is it? How does the therapeutic sort of desensitization come in?
It usually isn't quite enough, and while it's possible that just reconnecting with a traumatic event can be enough to release it, often more is needed than just connecting with it. And if nothing is done about it, often if it's not released it, then that person is left with that feeling that's been brought to the surface. So when somebody is in trance, so if it's a past life, the past life needs to unfold. Or if it's a past memory of childhood or whatever, that memory needs to be allowed to unfold so we can see and understand what's happened. And from there, depending on what seems most appropriate because of the orientation of the client and work that we've previously done, will depend on how we approach resolving that situation. So it could be that they need to be empowered so they can face the snakes. It could be that, or if it's a perpetrator, they need to actually face that perpetrator and speak their truth, because they never spoke their truth. You know, and they may have been in a situation where they were the perpetrator, they didn't speak their truth, and because of that, loads of people died, and then they were left with the guilt, and then they died, and then they carry that guilt and shame all the way through many lives. And I feel so guilty, and I don't know why. So when we get into the bottom of that guilt, all of a sudden they feel, so they need to express it. So we need to reframe the experience for them. So with a past life, usually it's when that past life's finished and we get to the end, we're able to then go through the scenario, connecting with the perpetrators, talking to them, expressing what we need to express. There can be cord cutting, there can be the removal of swords, or I mean, it's quite a broad field of what might be done, but basically it needs to be sorted out in a way that that client then feels, okay, I feel okay about this. This is resolved. And when it's resolved in that way, while someone's in a hypnotic trance, there's two things happening. It's a really powerful thing from a hypnotic point of view, because on a hypnotic subconscious level, they're like, I feel that this has been resolved, which is the clinical side of it. But on the energetic side of it, their focus of energy is actually changing the event. So, you know, you're pulling the sword out. It's a changing of the event. You're expressing what you need to express to your perpetrator because it wasn't expressed. You're pushing them away, you know, or saying what needs to be said. The energy transfer is really important. You're giving back the shame that belonged to them, that they've given to you. It's their shame. It's time to give it back to them and then reclaim the power that you left with them. So there's like, in shamanistic ritualistic stuff, that's called soul retrieval. So it can be done in different ways, but really it's all energy, and it's this claiming your energy and letting go of the stuff that serves you no longer. And this happens in Life Between Lives as well with sessions, because sometimes it can be that the guides will then take someone through a series of past lives that helps them understand something that they're working through, helps them understand why they have this tendency to feel this way about certain situations. So they go, oh, okay, now I understand why I have this issue in my current life, and it's not random, and it's up to me to overcome it. It's up to me to stand in my power and finally state my claim on this situation, or finally express myself in the face of these tyrants, you know, whatever it is for that person.
Absolutely.
So deep understandings can be brought to the surface with Life Between Lives that can be not as easy to do in a past life, I suppose you could say.
So when the client comes back round and they're back in their everyday sort of normal activities, what you're saying is that the next time they feel persecuted or they need to speak up their truth, they find it easier then to speak their truth from a more,
without thinking about it,
in a less violent or defensive way, because
they're speaking their truth when they should, and it's not being bottled up
instead of pushing it down.
So a situation happens and their reaction is, don't speak to me like that. That's really rude. You're disrespecting me. Whereas before they would dare not say boo to a mouse, and they're like, I feel disrespected and I feel they don't like me. Oh my God, I'm hurt, but I'll hide it because I don't want to offend anybody. You know what I mean? They're not speaking their truth. They need to say, look, this is wrong what you're doing. You know, they're not going to be angry and having a go, but they need to say, look, this is healthy anger and I need to state this.
Yeah, yeah. So basically standing in their power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which really is what we're all learning, isn't it? To stand more in our power as an authentic divine being of light, rather than a victim or a persecutor, or, you know, working through all these things. And because at a soul level we're all one, and, you know, we only have this illusion of separation and competition and duality on the earth plane. So yeah, so I mean, so that's really great information about sort of what we can do in past lives. So moving into the sort of life between lives, what personally for me I've found so magical about life between life sessions is that you do get to meet your elders, your spirit guides, your soul family, and you know, that can be so beautiful, and I mean, it's hard to describe it and unless you've experienced it, isn't it? So take me through a kind of a typical, you know, journey past. So we've gone through that past life, we've kind of
so a typical way that it would unfold is the death, there is the leaving of the earth, and this it's quite interesting actually how different people are kind of connect with different parts of the experience more than others. Some people at the deaths, I mean, a lot of the time people, they're aware that maybe they might have died with some traumatic way, and there might be some anger, there might be some sadness, but also they're like, oh, it's such a relief. You know, so usually with a life between lives, the intention is to go into a past life that would be most appropriate to transition. So we don't want to go into a past life where there's loads of trauma, because then it becomes difficult to leave that trauma sitting there and then go into an LBL. But generally,
so the past life bit of a LBL session is really kind of just the gateway to get you into the
it's not the only, but it's a really good one. It's a really good way to approach it with clients that I've taken into life between lives quite a few times. It's not so necessary, or they'll just sort of skip through that bit quite a lot. But the trouble is usually with clients is you take them into a deeper hypnosis for an LBL. So when they go into their past life, it's so rich and so like, whoa, they're really there because they're in a really deep trance, and so much information is coming out. It's like, no, we're going somewhere else. Come on. I know this is really good.
It's difficult. I mean, I remember my session is that there was so much going on, but I wasn't actually verbalizing it. And you were having to keep asking me questions because you get so, you know, into what you're feeling.
It's quite hard to express everything that you actually you don't even realize whether you're expressing it or not, do you? You're just there.
Almost like I remember sort of like thinking, almost kind of like, stop asking me questions, because, you know, and I was kind of like giving you kind of just one word answers or one line answers, because, you know, I was like, well, I'm busy.
Just quiet down for a bit, will you?
Actually, you know, I have had a client say that to me, that sort of like, actually, I wish you hadn't have asked me like loads of questions. But of course, from the practitioner's point of view, it's really hard for us to know when to move them on, and if they're actually experiencing anything at all. They might just have gone to sleep.
And also, or they can drift off into it, because this is what I maybe should have said earlier, is with hypnosis, or when someone goes into a trance, you have a shock and you go into trance, you're just in trance and you're just absorbing and taking everything in. It's only when you're in trance and someone's instructing you to go into a past life or into childhood or into whatever it is that's where you go, because you're being guided, your attention is being drawn in one way or another. I mean, so going back to your original question, because I realise we've sort of digressed a little bit.
As we do.
when somebody dies in their past life, there's this awareness of the separation from the body, and there's looking down at the body, and there's the awareness of the people there. And sometimes they can hang around for a while, and sometimes they can become earthbound, which isn't ideal if you're doing an LBL, because you've got to take them through that, because it all takes time. But ideally, once they with a good transition for a life between lives, it's quite quick, and they leave the earth plane and there's nothing holding them back. And there's usually this real, often, not always, but often they're aware of such a euphoric feeling. And you see this big smile on people's faces where they're just in this blissful, like, this all doesn't matter anymore. And I'm just, where are you going? I don't know.
Yeah. And that's the thing, actually, isn't it? It doesn't matter anymore, because your consciousness expands so vastly that you realize that all these things that you were worried about, or that was such a big deal when you were on the earth plane, they just don't matter anymore. It's just like, oh wow, man.
I think, you know, and it's interesting you talk about the questions, because I often, you know, I would say that if at that point I didn't ask any more questions, someone would just stay there for a certain amount of time and then come out of trance.
Yes.
It's likely. If I didn't, because they'd just be like,
yeah, I love it. Yeah. It's like being in a
going anywhere. I think so. Where are you going? I don't know. What's up there ahead of you?
What's the first thing that happens to them? Who do they tend to meet?
Quite often, mostly there'd be a welcoming party, and that welcoming party is usually the key characters from that life just led. But that's not always the case, because they may identify them as characters in their current life, or they may just identify them as beautiful beings that they recognize. You know, so there's this, well, they sometimes they see them in human form. Sometimes it's just an energy of color, and they just know them, and they're like, oh, I know them, I don't know. And it's almost like there's still this like residue of being a human, and they're kind of slowly coming into the spirit realm and slowly getting into this whole awareness of what they are and how they're relating to it. And there can often be noticed that there's a larger energy, which is often their guide. I mean, that's quite a sort of a more common experience, but people don't always experience it in that way. And sometimes with clients, we get to this stage and we don't really get beyond that stage, because so much is going on with the interaction with them and the guide, and that we don't actually get any further. And that can take up all the time, because that's what's important for them. But that's not always the case. They often will go through, then be led through some sort of healing process to help them shed the heavy energies of earth, or the human experience, as it were, so they can start to really take on their soul form, as it were. I always think about it as a bit like a kind of a spiritual light shower. So any dirt that you've still got on you from that kind of human life is kind of washed away, isn't it? And you just come out sort of nice, shiny, and I mean, we're talking about vibration, so the earth experience is a very low vibration compared with our soul's experience. Everything up there. I mean, sometimes people jump certain parts of the life between lives because it's more important or it's not relevant, but this is sort of a general way it unfolds, and quite often then there is the conversation with their spirit guide is usually about the life just led and the reconnection, and they'll, there's not any judgment, or should I say, the judgment that does come up is usually from them about them, and the spirit guide helps them work through that. And it's a very gentle sort of inquiring about the life just led, considerations about what they intended to learn. Did they do very well at learning that? Did they manage to deal with their challenges that they, you know, and there can often be an awareness that a lot of the challenges at this point, there can often be an awareness that the challenges they were going through were actually challenges they set themselves pre-birth. And that can be quite a nice realization for them, to like, I see, I took that on. And the guide's like, yeah, and we did try and warn you that it might be too much, but you know, you seemed pretty keen.
Because because it all seems a great idea, doesn't it, when we're the other side? And it's
and that comes out quite a lot, is that from our standing from the spirit realm and looking down at earth, we're like, well, I can do that. But then when we're down on earth, standing at this position, we're like, oh my God, this is who created this world that I'm trying to go through? It can't be me. I'd never do this to myself, because it's different. And it's like there's a disconnect between the two. And it's difficult for us looking down
Well,
to
that is
really
what's,
grasp how difficult it is.
yeah, I mean, that's what's described as the veil, isn't it? It's the veil of amnesia that separates us from who we are fully as a soul and from the spirit realms, although
And
we're always
from
connected.
our past lives,
Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Because if we didn't have that veil of amnesia, the spirit realm would get in the way of us having to deal with the challenges we have to deal with that we've set ourselves, or the past lives that we've experienced, and all the things from those past lives would bleed through and overly affect us and hamper us. I mean, it's enough that we've got to deal with our own childhood, that they're dealing with 100 childhoods. You know,
it's a very good point, because you know, I can't say it. You know,
physiologically.
yes,
Yeah,
we've
I think that's what it is.
just got a human brain, and the human brain can only cope with so much. So really, and that was one of the questions that somebody asked me to ask you, was, you know, was related to that why don't we remember all of these things, and why don't, and really it's kind of like, partly is because it wouldn't be a test if we knew the answers, and partly because there's so much to know that our human brain actually can't cope with it. It's the physical structure of it can't really cope with all of that knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah, there's that. I mean, you know, you could also say, well, do you really want to see the last scene of the play before you sit down and watch the play? It spoils it all for you. It's like, well, you'd be halfway through the play and go, well, I know how this ends. Should we just go and get a bite to eat? This is ruined.
Yeah, it's like you wouldn't fully engage in it, would you?
I know that it's going to be all right, or I know that he's going to, you know. So, do you know what I mean? It sort of would spoil the whole momentum of what's going on. You know.
Well, so I mean, what I found is that judgment is an earth thing. Judgment does not exist in spirit realms. That's a human.
A lot of human emotions.
And another thing that I think is really human. Generated really is this thought of karma, or the idea of what exactly karma is, that you know, many people think, and some people do use it as a victim story, don't they, that sort of you know,
it's my karma,
it's my karma, I must have done something bad, or vice versa, you know, judging others by saying, oh well, you know, you're obviously going through this because you've got something to pay back, you know, that's why you're a horrible person, or whatever. And so it works both ways, but my understanding of karma is not like that at all. And how do you view it from your
I think
experience?
karma is translated in different ways by different people. So I kind of, for that reason, I try and shy away from using it as a term through fear of it being misunderstood.
Yes.
But for me, the karma is really relating to our incomplete yet to complete lessons. So the lessons we learn as souls, they can often stretch over many lifetimes. We may be working on certain aspects over a period of lives. So that would be classed as our karma. So we may be learning to speak up and stand up for ourselves. And we may have been working on this in previous lives, and the lives we've chosen, or the scenarios that we've aimed for in our lives to help us learn that, have not worked. So naturally we go, oh, maybe we need to up the ante a little bit this time and make it, because I just didn't get it. I didn't.
A bit more obvious.
I need to make it a bit more obvious, until all of a sudden, you know, you're really, really like suffering because of it. It takes that much for you to go, I've had enough. I've had enough. I'm going to do it this time. I won't take it anymore. And finally you stand up, you know. So for me, I would say that's karma. So it's not, because some people see it as a punishment. It's not a punishment, although it could be viewed as a punishment, because often it's tied in with suffering, because if it takes us to go to a point of suffering before we really finally get the lesson, you know. So
this is interesting, because it touches on soul contracts then, doesn't it? So say if you wanted to learn self-confidence and to stand up for yourself, and then, you know, I'm part of your soul family, and I have an agreement with you to be a persecutor for you, to try and push you to stand up for yourself. That's kind of how these things work, isn't it?
So I could yeah, so that's a perfect example, you know. So someone might be someone might be relating to their ex-husband who was really abusive and really, really horrible and caused such terrible trauma in their life. But that could be part of a soul contract, that before birth, they got together and one of them was saying, look, I have this problem with throwing my weight around and bullying. It's, oh, do you know what? I have this problem in being bullied and not standing up for myself. Why don't we get married? That'd be great. Oh my God, we need to do this before. This would be brilliant. It's bound to explode. We're bound to end up being torn apart. It's bound to, we will have no choice but to face these things that we're trying to learn. Oh, I can't wait. That'd be brilliant. And then, of course, we get into the life and we're like, oh my God, this is terrible. Who would ever choose? Why did I, this is, you know, and it turns out that this perpetrator in your life is actually part of your soul group or an affiliated part of your soul group, maybe. You know? So even when we start talking about soul groups, we come to realize that it's not just the people that we love and love us. It can also be our enemies. Yeah. They can also be part of our soul group or affiliated with our soul group, because they are willing to go the extra distance to actually challenge us in a way that really is important for us to rise up to the occasion and make that important step that we've not been able to make in the past.
Yeah, and that's really that's really quite triggering, isn't it, when you first come across that concept, to think that somebody that may have caused you a lot of anguish, a lot of trauma, might actually on a soul level be one of your closest soul family, and they've done it out of love to help you grow and to help you expand in your experiences here. And yeah, I think
between lives, this can be a really powerful realization for people that are maybe they're not really able to accept the abuse of a parent or a partner or a friend even, you know. And in life between lives, these sort of realizations can come up, and they're like, oh my God, yeah, now it all makes sense.
And of course, the really empowering bit is when you stop looking at yourself as a victim. You can't change something that's happened. So, and you know, we're not saying that you can agree with somebody's behavior if they've behaved, you know, wrongly towards us, but it's just changing our perception, isn't it, from being the victim of that circumstance to kind of like thinking, well, what has that taught me? Would I be able to stand up and say no now, whereas I wasn't able to before? And if I can, that's been a great learning, and that's actually helped me, because that helps me in other areas of my life where I'm now able to say no, where I was struggling before. So so I think it's always important, isn't it, to just find, whatever those circumstances are, to just find that nugget of growth, or, you know, of a lesson. I
suppose it comes down to people coming to the deep realization that the events in their life aren't random, and the difficulties, trials and tribulations that they're going through were foreseen by them, and for some reason, unbeknown to them in their current life, they chose it because it was for the betterment of their soul's growth. Because a lot of the time we're not aware of the experiences we've had in past lives. You know, like if somebody, I mean, I love the phrase that the hunter becomes the hunted. So if somebody is always being the persecutor, and they keep on finding that whenever they're in a life where they have the opportunity to be a persecutor, they find they keep slipping into that role. They're like, in between lives, they're like, oh, I keep doing it. And they're talking to their friends like, yeah, I know, but, you know, maybe you'll get it in the end. You know, the only way I'm going to get around this is if I'm born into a weak body. You know, do you know what? I'm going to be a quadriplegic. I'm going to be a quadriplegic, and I'm going to have to be dependent on people, and I'm going to have a family that actually I need to find someone that's going to find this a real burden. So they're going to be really, really not going to be very helpful to me. So I can understand what it's like to not be powerful, because I keep on, you can see how the hunter becomes the hunted, because they want to understand what it's like to be hunted, so that then they can go, right, I think now I'm ready to have a powerful life where I don't abuse my power. I feel that life taught me how what it's like from that way on a deep enough level that even though I'm going to go through the amnesia, there's going to be something deep within me that's going to say, I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. I know that I could personally gain from this situation, but it's going to cause suffering with those weaker people. And I'm not. Do you see it? So there's
yeah. And I think that's what I mean about, that's how I see more karma being, is that sort of like, if you're a perpetrator, then it's not that you become a victim in, say, your next life because you're being punished for being a perpetrator, but more that your soul recognizes that, oh, actually, that, you know, that wasn't a great way to behave. And I'd really like to know what it felt like from your perspective as being a victim. You know, how would it feel to be the victim instead of the perpetrator, or vice versa? You know, because we've all played out these roles, haven't we? We've all been the victim and the perpetrator, because the soul wants to experience all these different things. It's like it's like if we were in a play and always playing the goodie, you know, every now and again you're like, what is it like to play the baddie? You know, it feels quite challenging. You know, I'm so bored of, you know, being Mary Poppins. You know? and of course I totally understand how this is very triggering when you look at it from a human level, because we believe in death, and we believe that, you know, but at a soul level, that when there is no death, it is just a series of different plays, isn't it? Series of different experiences. And today I want to go and play that, and tomorrow I might play that. And, you know, so the higher perspective we can see things, the less we get, I think, embroiled in that kind of emotional triggering, and blame and shame and judgment.
I think another important point about the concept of karma as well, Ange, is the relationship aspect as well. So, I mean, and it still sits within that realm of learning and understanding and growing souls, and it still isn't anything about punishment. But if we have somebody in our lives, in our current life, for instance, that is a real challenging person, and we really haven't forgiven them, we really feel a hatred for them, and we keep on having falling outs with them, if we don't resolve that relationship from our own side, nothing to do with how they end up being, but for ourselves, then there is still an energetic charge that needs to be sorted out. Therefore, that will have to be sorted out in the future. And because it's an energetic thing that has been created on this plane, the earth plane, it needs to be completed on the earth plane. So we can't then go into the spirit realm and then work through it with that soul. So I know we had a falling out, but let's make up and we're all good friends because we all love each other here, don't we? It doesn't work like that, because of that is an energetic aspect that happened on earth. It's like, do you know, we're gonna have to go and do that again.
Yeah.
Oh, right. How are we going to remember how to? We keep doing this. We keep banging heads, don't we? It's like, I know. How, you know, how can we sort this out? This is crazy.
Well, this is interesting, because it's something, because it brings up something that we haven't covered yet, and that is, you know, the thing that puts Earth apart from all other experiences, and that is free will. So no matter what we've decided or thought was a good idea in spirit, when we get here, we still have, we have the amnesia and the veil, which is bad enough, it's difficult enough, so you don't remember what you're doing here. So that's challenging enough. But then we have free will as humans as well, don't we? So no matter what our soul is, you know, would prefer to learn, we still have that element of free will where we can just go, no.
Of course, and it's a good point you make, because not only when we come into this world, we go through the veil of amnesia, we're also, through that veil of amnesia, we're also having the illusion of being completely disconnected from unconditional love, eternal life, and the most beautiful energy and beauty. And all of a sudden, bang, we're disconnected from it. So we end up coming into this world in this feeling of scarcity, you know, abandonment, non-acceptance by others, often non-acceptance of the self by the self, you know. And all of this creates a standpoint where we have our free will and we go, no, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and we're stuck in this pattern sometimes that spirit can't intervene. I think that's what you're talking about, isn't it? It's how spirit from the light, including us when we're in the light, we respect the free will of spirit in human experience.
Yeah.
And that's the learning that they go through. And it's only when the spirit incarnate as humans ask for help can we then intervene as spirit and help.
Yeah.
I
So
think,
going back to the example of, you know, the husband and wife that have made that sort of soul contract before they get here to have that explosive sort of so say that you know the wife is on track, she's kind of like, you know, I'm into doing this, but then the husband, when he gets here, is on his free will, kind of, actually I don't want to get married to you, or I don't, you know, I never call you, or whatever.
well,
but what happens then? What, because the wife still wants
there
to
would be, I think what often happens is there'll be a deep knowing, or there'll be signposts that draw people together. So I don't think free will so much gets in the way of your pre-birth plans in that sense, in the sense that, you know, you've planned to get together. So it might be such a chance meeting with that person that you think, oh, that was such a slim chance that we met and we got together, and then we ended up going out and then we got married. Oh my God, you know, but that was the point where you joined, and there was just a knowing. There was just certain things, certain coincidences that just brought you together, and you like, you know, that is the one. You know? And free will is more of that conscious thing that, you know, when the spirit don't intervene. So, I mean, this gets into the subject of spirit that haven't actually transitioned to the light. When I talk of spirit like that, I mean like ghosts. You know, you can have well-meaning ghosts that don't respect free will, and they're the kind of spirits that wag their, oh, you mustn't do that, and I think you should be coming and doing this. And, you know, that's an example of like they're not respecting free will. You know, where spirit guides come down and they may be present and realize that someone's suffering, and they're like, I'm here for you, but you know, you've got to ask me. You know, I'm not going to start elbowing you out the way or trying to stop this from happening. I mean, there are situations when you hear these stories of angels intervening, and you know, when people have accidents, there's certain interventions that happen. So that kind of, I suppose, could be an example where it's sort of on that verge of, are they really overstepping the mark of free will, or is there a certain, what do you call it, mitigating circumstances? I don't know, but there are situations where clearly it's overridden. It seems quite rare that happens.
I think it's extreme cases that tends to happen in this. Because most of the time we're just allowed to kind of play it out as we, you know, as we.
I think most of the time, and that's interesting, isn't it? I think so. That could also be that because of free will, someone has made choices through free will, which has changed the course of events, which meant that that person then is in a situation that wasn't planned by them and wasn't intended. You know, and that isn't really for the betterment of their soul. It's not really what was intended. So maybe then there's an intervention. There's an intervening of the situation. I don't know. But that's possible what's going on there.
I think you're right, because I think, you know, I've had experiences myself of either time really, but I was kind of like asking about the soul contracts thing in a way that sometimes I think you have a main contract with somebody, don't you? But then if their free will choice takes them off somewhere else, then you might have a subcontract with several other souls.
So
that would fill that role.
That wouldn't necessarily be free will as much as if the reason, say, you take the couple that were getting married, that are going to have this explosive experience, which was going to help them grow. If one of them got to a point where they'd achieved the learning they desired to gain from the marriage before they met and got married, then their life path would change, and because there'd be no point in them having this explosive marriage if one of them had got to the point where they found their voice, or they found the power to not resist, you know, to resist the temptation of overriding and bullying. You know, if they get to that point where they've learned that from other aspects of the life when they're younger, then their life course will change. And yeah, there'll be, as you say, maybe there'd be a B plan, you might call it, you know, another contract where another soul would step in to fill the role, so they could, that the soul that hadn't learned could potentially have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
This is happening on a deeper level that can often be accessed in our sleep state, you know. So when we sleep, there's a lot of stuff we do that isn't remembered as souls. So we are able to access our soul contracts and adjust things depending on how things unfold. And I suppose that would, to some degree, allow for compensating for the choices of free will that other souls make, which can change the shape of a situation that we're moving into. Pre-birth, we have a good idea of the trajectory that life's going to take that we've chosen. And it's going to go into this and go into that. And because of childhood, it's going to be lacking in certain areas. So that's going to prime you to being a certain way, which would be perfect for you. And then things can change, so we can tweak that. But this is done outside of our conscious awareness. This is because it wouldn't work if we remembered all of that. You know, it's like there's two parts of it. There's the part of us behind the scenes going, oh, we need to rewrite the script here because this ain't going to work out, you know. We're asleep at the minute. It's okay. We're in a deep sleep, so we can just, how about this? You know, so there's adjustment happening. And interestingly, this can also happen on a conscious level through Life Between Lives, if it's appropriate. And this is why I say sometimes certain areas aren't accessible for some people because it's inappropriate and it wouldn't be right. And this is often with younger people because they haven't played out a lot of their life plan at this stage. And I notice sometimes with younger people, because with a past life regression, sometimes if it's not too much to sort out, I won't interrupt and I'll allow them to go into the spirit realm just a little bit so they can get that feeling of transition, because that can be really valuable to somebody that is having trouble with death and grief and loss and stuff. To actually experience dying and feel the beauty of that can be really valuable. And sometimes I notice that it might be going really well because they're a really receptive client, and all of a sudden it's just like they just hit a wall and there's nothing. It's like, okay, this is as far as this person can go. And then we can bring it back round to doing the transformation work for the past life, you know. And I've noticed this quite a few times. There's certain blockages. You can feel it. It's like the client's really responsive, and all of a sudden, that's it. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And I can feel the energy changing. It's like, okay, the guides have stepped in.
Yeah. And I suppose as a practitioner, it's really important to have that sensitivity, isn't it? Because you don't, if you're being blocked, then you don't want to start taking a sledgehammer to that door. You know, you have to respect it, don't you?
Yeah. And usually, I mean, it can happen in other ways as well in sessions. And usually it's because maybe the session's going in the wrong direction and the focus needs to be somewhere else. You know? I've learned over the years how important it is that if something comes up and it's a big thing, we need to work on that thing. You know, we don't want to start getting into loads of other stuff because all of a sudden, how are we going to sort all this? You know, so if a traumatic experience has surfaced and we've reconnected with it, okay, well, let's stay here and focus on this now and work out what we can do to resolve it before we move on, because it might be that we can clear it up and sort it out quite quickly, or it might open out into a whole other world of stuff. When you're working with the subconscious mind, it's endless how things can unravel.
Yes, it's expect the unexpected, isn't it? And we as practitioners need to be able to flow with that. And go, like you said, is whatever comes up and whatever is appropriate. So that can be quite scary when you start off practicing, because because the way that traditional education is set up is that there's this framework, this structure, and this is what you do. This is what you do.
And if that happens, you've got to do this. You can have a manual. Hang on a minute. The manual.
Whereas actually, to do this work, I think to our best ability for both us and the clients, we need to have that self-confidence to allow everything to flow as it seems to be flowing, to have enough control, but allow sort of spirit, our and the client spirits to step in and guide where they want us to go. which is really nice. It's kind of like, it makes you quite humble, doesn't it, as a practitioner, instead of kind of feeling like some sort of expert, you know.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, no, it is very humbling. I mean, I feel honoured to be doing this work, to be honest. It's quite beautiful, and often very moving, you know, to be part of somebody reconnecting with their soul and their soul family, and the experience of this beautiful experience of dying is an honor, you know. I mean, while some people might rush through it because they're not so deeply connected with the experience for various different reasons, often people have such a rich, beautiful experience with all of this. I mean, it's quite varied how one perceives their inner worlds. So there's a variation on how the experience is, you see. So some people might read the Michael Newton books and have such high expectations, but of course, he did thousands of case studies to write those books, and he's only cited the very best of each case for each section. So people think that they're going to have a past life regression that's going to be like a Michael Newton book. Now, while that is possible, and some people do have that experience, that's not always the case. But what people do experience is relevant to them. And it's like you were saying before, it's like as we develop and open up to this, it's relevant to where we're at and at what stage we're at in our life in development, you know. So we can only take on what is appropriate for us at that time. And the more somebody does the work, the easier it becomes, and the more attuned they get to it, which is why I generally don't do life between lives until, at least with me or somebody else of a good training, has done a past life regression with somebody, because it's getting familiar with the process, understanding how the process works. So you're not kind of going, oh, this is mad. You know, your conscious mind isn't going, well, I wonder if this is really happening or not. You know, you want them to be able to just let go and really submerge into the experience. So it's quite important to for them to experience this way of reconnecting with memory first.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, as a therapist, I don't think I could do this work without the experience that I had from being the client, because you just get to understand about what the client is experiencing, and especially for me, how that conscious mind interferes. And Dolores Cannon called the conscious mind Mr. Stupid. So she'll say, oh, Mr. Stupid stepped in, you know. And but you know, I am a really logical, analytical person. So and I know some people are surprised to learn that, because a lot of my beliefs and perceptions are so out there compared to most people. But actually,
it's an asset, I think.
All the things I believe have had to come through, like questioning, you know, analyzing, you know, doubting, and then being shown, you know, often sort of spirit just keeps bitch slapping me until I get it. You know? And,
but that's your skill. That's an asset, because you experience it and go, right, I need to know everything about this. How does it work? I need to know this from the ground up. Which is brilliant, which is great.
But also, you know, I've said this before, that spirit have to work with me in a way that it'll give me a dream or an experience or something that then I don't know where that's come from, and then I have to go and research something, and you know, the answer, I'll find the answer, because otherwise my analytical mind would just think, oh, you're making that up because you read it in a book and you quite fantasize about being an angel or something or whatever, you know. So it's, I have to have an experience of the energy first, so they do it with me backwards. And that's just because they know that they have to get round this kind of logical, doubting, analytical mind that I've got. But anyway, we've been talking over an hour already. And I knew that it wouldn't be you know, it wouldn't be a short session, but I just want to, because I did on the Soul Collective, the Facebook group that I'm an admin for and have helped set up, I did ask some of them, you know, if they had any questions for you, because I knew I said that I was doing this interview today. So we have kind of like covered quite a lot of it actually, but I just want to have a quick look through and see. So we talked a little bit about soul contracts, but Crystal wanted to know, are there contracts that are floating around out there that have expired but are still lingering because we need to actually cancel them? I had something come up in an Akashic reading before, and I was so confused. I figured that if they had expired, why would I need to cancel them? So that's not something I've come up against before. So maybe that's a particular thing about Akashic record reading. But do you have to kind of consciously cancel a contract?
Well, I suppose, I mean, I'm thinking about that. I suppose if you had a limiting belief that was born out of a contract, and that contract had run its course, yet you still held on to that limiting belief, you would be the reason why that contract is still active, even though it's run its course. So that might be possibly how that might be perceived as a result of that. Because a soul contract is really, it can be viewed in different ways, but I mean, really, a soul contract is two souls coming together and making the decision to work together on a subject. And when they've completed working on that subject, that would automatically be finished, unless one soul had completed the learning and the other soul hadn't quite completed it. You know, therefore maybe they were still holding on to a limiting belief, like I say. So maybe there's still a resonance about that contract that's still needing to be completed for them.
So if we took the example about the husband and wife, so the wife is kind of like, so they've got divorced and they've gone their separate ways, and the wife maybe has learnt her bit of the contract and off she goes, but the man hasn't. So that,
then I suppose for the man, the contract wouldn't be expired, would it? It would still be active.
So then would he then call in those subcontractors to play out a similar scenario or similar pattern? And this is what happens to us, isn't it? That when we don't learn something, then the same lesson comes around again. It might be with different people, different circumstances, but the underlying energetic lesson seems to be the same.
So I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I suppose we can only guess what the person that said it's an expired soul contract, we can only really guess at what really they meant by that.
Yeah,
because that's really what it comes down to. What does that actually mean? You see, we don't know. But really, a soul contract is just an agreement that, while it can be changed because you might come to a realization that actually no. So for instance, with soul, I think I was going to say this earlier. In life between lives, or indeed with past lives, when we're doing the transformation work, soul contracts may be an appropriate way to clear things up. So it could be that you've done the work, you've got to a point where you've forgiven the perpetrator, who is the same person in your current life who was the perpetrator in a past life. You're like, do you know what? I've made my peace. It's okay now. Okay, so let's look at the contract. Take that contract, have a look at it. Do you feel that it's time to destroy that contract? Yes. Okay, we destroy that contract. We rip it up. We burn it in the fire, and that's more of a final kind of like we are definitely done here. So the actual experience in hypnosis was just that last little leg of the journey to finish it off. You see.
So do you think it's more about actual awareness then? So I mean, like I say, Crystal doesn't kind of, obviously it was a public post, so she didn't go into detail.
Elaborate, so we can only guess on that a little bit.
But I'm kind of like thinking maybe she's coming from a place that, well, I as far as I'm concerned, I'm finished with that contract, but do I have, but is an awareness of that enough to dissolve it, or do you have to kind of like go into meditation possibly, or something where you actually
on a conscious level, and you might decide that you've had enough of it, but on a subconscious level, you may be holding on to stuff that you're not aware of, which is keeping it active. Like I'm saying, perfect example is you may still hold a limiting belief about yourself, which is keeping an expired contract active in your life.
Yeah,
it's like just making the decision to let it go may not be enough. You may have to look a bit deeper and go, okay, I need to do some more work around this subject.
Actually, I think this is a really good example of when going to and having a hypnotherapy session is much more useful than either you doing it on your own, where you can kind of like
you can explore it.
Or going to somebody who's doing a reading for you, so they're telling you things, but there's no way of actually you really validating it other than from that's what the person is telling you. So when we're in deep trance, we kind of know what's true, don't we? We know what is true and what's not.
Well, also there's the opportunity for the practitioner to help the client. So if it comes up that there's this soul contract that's half done and that's loitering around, you can go, okay, well, let's have a look at this contract. What does it say? What's it about? You know, can you change it? You know, so someone's in a trance, they're not on a conscious awareness level, they're in a trance. So let's have a look at it. Let's see. And if they feel an agreement, this is time to let it go. Okay, let's screw it up. Let's get rid of it. You know, let's do this now, you know.
Because when you're in trance, you are more honest with yourself. So whereas when you're more conscious, you might deny things or you know, not want to go there. You know, because self-denial is a really big thing with the conscious mind, isn't it? But when you're in deep trance, my experience anyway is that you kind of know when you're kidding yourself. You kind of know that actually I'm saying I learned that lesson, but I haven't really. Or I'm saying that I've forgiven my ex-husband, but actually, if I'm really honest, I haven't. And there's still that limited belief. So that well, I think that kind of, you know, that kind of does answer the question, I think. So let me have a look. Because she did say, is it possible to cancel a contract that you no longer want to engage in, and if so, are there trade-offs or consequences for doing so? Or do you have to see your contract through no matter what? Example, so that you feel like you've learnt your lessons, but there is still time left on your contract. I don't think that there's a time limit on these things, is there really?
No, and it's like on a soul level, if you truly didn't want to go through with what you'd previously agreed on, I think you could say, look, this is too much for me. You know, you could communicate with that soul, and that soul would be like, yeah, I agree. I think we should tone it down a bit, or we should do it in another life. You know, you can change it, but of course you need to be in a trance to be able to connect with the higher self of that soul. And this is what I was touching on this earlier. This does happen in sleep time. We do adjust things. So if something's still active, there's a reason for it, and you've probably made that choice. And on a conscious level, you know, I wouldn't make that choice. This is terrible, you know. It's like, well, maybe there's something you're not aware of that is important that needs to be addressed here.
And it may not be a really big thing. It might just be a little tweak that you know that you need to do.
So to annul a contract, as it is, as it's said, is, I mean, she was asking, would there be any consequence? Well, to annul a contract, there needs to be an agreement. You need to be sort of like, well, this is finished. Yeah, I agree. This is finished. Yeah, well, let's just. You see, I don't think that actually we are sitting there as souls writing binding contracts with big pens on scrolls that are stored away and they're locked away, and we can't do anything about it once we're here. It's not like we've signed up the timeshare. I tend to think that the contract aspect is just a way of us as humans being able to understand the arrangements we've made with other souls that are for our own good.
Right, we're taking things far too literally, I mean, in the word contract.
It gets all humanized so much. We think of contract. Oh, I've got signed a contract for this house, and I've paid a deposit, and I can't get out of it. You know, it's kind of not like that. We're using these words to try and be able to talk about the energy realm, the energy. We're energy beings, you know, and we're trying to make sense of it on a human level.
And that's where, you know, I think that most of my real learning spiritually has come from is seeing things energetically, about energy and frequency and vibration, because when you start looking at things as energetic vibrations and frequencies, it takes that judgment out of that's right, that wrong, that's good, that's bad, and just kind of like that's an experience, a frequency that I wanted to experience. So I wanted to experience that feeling of shame or grief or happiness or joy or whatever it was. So it kind of takes that human judgment out of things a bit. And yeah, I think definitely that's what happens on a contract level, that if you've reached a vibrational state, then you don't need the lessons anymore that was trying to push you into that vibrational state,
and then that would naturally fall away.
Yeah,
and I think that's the key, isn't it? It's sort of, once you get to that point, you're like, well, that naturally will annul the contract.
Yeah. So Natalie wanted to know, she'd like to know, how do souls spend their time in between lives? After the rest period, are we given a job to do before we choose our next incarnation? And this made me chuckle, because I remember my life between session with you where it seems I've got loads of jobs and I do all sorts of different things, and it's kind of like, wow, I'm really busy between lives. But it brings in the concept of time, and it's not really a kind of a linear progression, is it?
I think it's also I noticed the language saying, do we get given jobs? And I think it's important to point out that we choose.
Yes.
It's not that we're beholden and we have to, it's not like we're at school and we have to behave ourselves and you will do this now and I'm going to go, it's like
a job.
I have a passion to express something that's of value, and other souls are interested in what I have to express. And you find yourself in a role of being a teacher, or I have a passion to understand something. I've had some lives, and there's some things I understand. Well, this other person has a passion to express something that's relevant to that. You should come along to this. So you end up going to this school of learning. Or I want to actually explore other worlds. It's endless what we may do as souls, what we may choose to do in between lives. We can incarnate in other realms, on other planets, other dimensions. Of course, we spoke of karma and how the karma that we create, or the unresolved relationships or experiences that we create on Earth, bind us to Earth. So that means we need to keep, even if we choose not to, we still need to keep coming back to the Earth to resolve the unresolved experiences that we started. So this is how karma comes about. It's like, if you live life on Earth, you're probably going to be doing a few of them, because it's unlikely you're going to go, I'm going to live on Earth and not create any karma. I'm not going to have any loose ends by the time I die. So I can go back if I want, but I don't have to. It seems pretty unlikely that would happen. So but that being said, we might put that on hold and decide to have an easy life in a realm where there's no challenges, or we might just want to have a rest and go into a realm where we can just be in this complete restful meditative state because we've had a really hard life and we need to heal slowly, or we want to experience the animal realm and experience animal souls. I mean, it's so broad. This is the thing. I started to sort of outline the normal journey of life between lives, but I think we got into other subjects, which is fine. But that is only a generalization which I was going to describe, because there's so many things that people might get involved with, or souls, should I say, might get involved with other souls. And it's quite beautiful how endless that is. Some souls like to spend time in the Akashic records and explore those records and all the knowledge. And some souls might like to be helping souls and training to be spirit guides and love the idea of helping souls on Earth. And they may be going to a school of learning to help them study on that subject. I mean, it really is. It's vast, the things that people, from my experience, when I first started out in this field, it's like you do your training, you go, right, we've got this, and this is the format, and you're taught that, if they go there, you bring them back in to go, and it's like, it's nothing like that sometimes.
I don't think I've had a normal session.
But it's relevant to the person because of their current life and what's important to them as a soul, And while many people do go through the normal Michael Newton story, and it does often unfold in that way. Sometimes it's, as I say, it can be the actual life between us might be focused on one aspect of that, or it might be focusing on an aspect that hasn't been written about, you know, actually very relevant to the client, you know. So a communication with their guides on a deep level could be really what it's all about, and everything else just isn't important, you know. And having that dialogue and being able to express what's important and understand what they need to understand about themselves, could happen in the first, you know, opening up of the scene when they first die and they get into the spirit realm. Sometimes we're there, and we're there for hours going through that process of learning and understanding all of that.
Just going back to just quickly to sort of contracts and also kind of you know, traumatic experiences, is that when I had my life between lives with you, I remember very clearly realizing that what I've done as a soul for others is been their child that has died, you know, early through illness, cancer, whatever. Or there was a lot of teenage lives that kind of went past me about where I'd, you know, I'd overdosed on drugs, or, you know, or committed suicide. And there was definitely a few car crashes in there as well. And it's sort of, you know, what my understanding and deep knowing was by being shown that was that I was in service to the souls that were my parents in those lives, because they wanted to experience what it was like to lose a child or a teenager. How would they cope with that grief, you know, any shame or guilt that you know, that would come around that as well. And you know, and that was something that was quite surprising to me, because that's not something, again, that I'd ever thought about. But when I was in hypnosis, that memory and that knowing came to me. And it's interesting because I've never been maternal in this life, and I've never wanted children. And you know, as I've got older, I've realized that that's partly because that's not what I'm here to experience, or my mission, sort of thing. So being other people's children was not really anything that was featuring in my reasons of why I wanted a session. But I found that fascinating, because it's almost like I could completely understand why I chose to have those short lives in service to those of the souls.
I'm really glad you brought this up, because this comes up within this realm. This can come up quite a bit, and I think it's a really valuable understanding that can be really helpful to people that are grieving. Not just people that are grieving for the loss of somebody that was only in this world for a short time, but also to realize that souls make the decision to only have a short life because it serves them on one level for where they're at that point, and it also serves those around them that are having to deal with the loss. Because that's a really powerful thing, and to realize that that's going on also brings you around to realizing that the loss of somebody that isn't having a short life it's not random, and they've had their life and it's their time, and it's okay. You know, it's okay that this is their time to go, because people often, when they lose someone, especially when it's a short life, there's a tendency to blame themselves. If only I'd have done this different, or if only I'd have seen the signs sooner, or if only I could have been there quicker, or if only this is a real common part of the grieving process that sometimes people can get stuck with and find it hard to move on from. It's the guilt aspect of it. So I think that what you bring up there is really important to just open out a little bit, because it's really helpful for people when they're trying to understand grief and loss from that perspective. I think it's a powerful aspect that comes from life between lives.
And something that's come up for me, probably because I'm a woman practitioner, you know, dealing with mostly women clients. You know, I have had, you know, mothers grieving because they've lost, you know, they've miscarried. So it wasn't even that the child was even born. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Well, I'm really glad you brought that up as well, because I think what comes from the understanding of life between lives, again, is really important for people that have either terminated or had an abortion, because even though with a termination it may be a choice, there can still be an awful lot of guilt, you know. And on top of that, there's the active hormones that of mothering and all that that's still active, that plays out and can be really painful. But below that also is the guilt aspect of, I've done this to a soul, a living being. But what shows with Life Between Lives in the process of when somebody goes through and reincarnates and joins, there's often this realization that they choose the body that they have chosen for their current life for certain reasons, which is going to serve them, including the shortfallings of that body. But when they join with that body, it's usually not until 4 months, because the baby itself has not formed enough for the soul to fully integrate and connect. So whenever you ask somebody around what age, it's usually 4 months or more, and sometimes even then it's they're not fully connecting and they're kind of in and out during the pregnancy time. And that realization, because that comes up a lot, and that realization can be really helpful for mothers who have terminated or had miscarriage, to realize that there's not a soul involved in this. And moving on a little bit more from that, from when the child might die in childbirth or cradle, is it cradle death?
Stillbirth and
yeah, stillbirth. Sometimes you get children that just die. I think it's called cradle death.
Yeah, the sudden cot death.
Cot death. That's cot death syndrome. Yeah, which isn't uncommon to happen.
I mean, that must be one of the most traumatic things as a mother to go through, isn't it? That you've actually gone through all of that, all of the labour, and you've bonded with that baby, and then to lose a baby so soon must be just awful. I mean, how do people come to terms with that in that kind of life between life soul contract way?
I mean, the realization, so on a conscious level, so someone may be listening to this conversation who this might relate to, and on a conscious level they might hear that, well, the soul of that child will have foreseen that outcome before birth, because such a big event like that isn't random. They would have gone, okay, no, I'm willing to be in Earth for a short time because it serves me and it serves those people that are needing to have this experience. Now, on some level, that can be comforting, but also quite difficult to accept, maybe. But it's on a conscious level. When in hypnosis, someone's able to understand it on a deeper level, it's much more. It gives much more of a peace of mind, because with that can come the understanding. Because when in a Life Between Lives or in hypnosis, in regression therapy, when somebody is experiencing, it's like real-time experiencing in hypnosis, they're able to come to terms with it in a certain way that they can make their peace with the situation. They can talk to that soul. They can talk to that child or that person. They can say the things that they weren't able to say. And again, there's two things happening here. There's, on the clinical hypnosis area, on the psychology area, the person is able to express that wasn't expressed in a meaningful way, which is really powerful healing. But on a deeper energetic level, there's an energy exchange that's going on, and there is a connection with that soul. So there's a deep sort of, okay, I've made my peace now, in a way that can be very difficult to do otherwise. It can be difficult to do that on a conscious level, So with a Life Between Lives, or indeed that kind of deep hypnosis sort of working in that way, it can be a really nice way for someone to make their peace with that type of situation and many other situations, as you can imagine, as you know, being a therapist yourself.
And I had a client who did miscarry, and when we looked into it at a soul level, the soul that came in and then went again, if you like, that soul actually was only just dipping its toe into physical incarnation. So it just wanted to know what it would be like to be in a kind of a physical structure, but didn't feel ready to be properly born and kind of go full on into a life. So then there was the contract between the mother and the soul saying, well, you know, I'd like to experience that loss. If you only want to dip your toe in, then, you know, I can be that vehicle for you to. So that was really fascinating and interesting. And again, it's sort of, you know, exploring that for the mother was really powerful in letting go of some of her sort of grief and doubt and things like that. And the other thing that I've had with another client was that they were twins, and the soul that has, you know, is incarnated and alive now, wasn't really sure whether they really wanted to go through with it. So the other soul came in and kind of almost like kept them company in the room and sort of held their hand almost energetically until they felt absolutely ready that, yes, you know, I'm going to do this, I'm going to take this on. And then once that decision was made, you know, they went full term and, you know, to be incarnated, and the other soul left the room. So from the mother's point of view, she lost a twin, you know, she lost one of her babies. So there was, you know, there were things that she wanted to learn and experience from that, which then had connotations and impacts on the soul that was left, who did go, was born. So because that then played into the dynamics of their relationship and how the relationship that they've had together. So that's really quite fascinating. The other thing is that the soul that left has remained very, very close to, you know, the soul that's incarnated, and has become one, well, if not their main guide. So, you know, which just shows you that you know, when we're soul family, we're always together, aren't we? That we're always energetically connected, whether we're in physical form or not. And I think that's really really lovely as well.
It's an illusion that we're alone.
Yes.
A very powerful one, I might say. I mean, it's as if, you know, we talk about hypnosis. I think everyday life is probably the deepest hypnosis we ever experience, because we're creating this environment out of energy, you know, and it's our own perception of all the things we see around us. You know?
Yeah, and I think, I mean, it is such a powerful perception, isn't it, that we are disconnected, that we come into this earth life and something cuts off, you know, our connection with everything else. And that's not really true, is it? We are always fully connected. It is just literally our perceptions and our limited beliefs that put that kind of limit on it of how much information is coming through. So the more that we work on ourselves, the more that we heal, the more inner work that we do, and the more kind of heart-centered we are. It's almost like that those illusions and those filters start to fall away, and we feel more connected, and we can hear our higher self and our guides clearer and better, which is why you've got some people walking around in this amazing sort of like bliss, you know, that seem to be having a totally different reality than maybe somebody who's still very much under the illusion that they're separate, they're a victim, they're, you know, all there is what they can see in front of them, nothing else, sort of thing. So let me just have a quick, I think we've answered all the questions really just by us chatting, but I'll just double check. Yeah, because Alison was asking whether you'd experience a client when you weren't allowed to access anything. Does this inability have more to do with the client's consciousness than true desire? And I think we kind of covered that, didn't we? And I think that the client's intent and desire does come into that as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, that, I mean, I was talking about how the guides can block a session, but of course, if somebody isn't able to relax, or they you know, if a client comes to me and they've got a lot of fear about what we're doing and they're not fully able to relax, well, then that's our first point of what we've got to work with, because you know, we're not going to get very far until we can get beyond that. So we need to address that, because if we were to then start working on past lives, it probably wouldn't be very successful. You know?
The old I don't see anything, I don't, you know. But then there's that misconception, isn't it, that we're all going to have this kind of technicolor cinema screen in our head, and actually you know, a lot of people don't experience it like that, do they? I am a very visual person, but I'm also clairsentient, so I just know things, so I just get a feeling. So if you tell me to close my eyes and imagine myself on a beach, I could see the beach, but what's most powerful for me is the feeling of what it would be like to be on a beach. So it's the feelings that come first, and then I can kind of put them into context with some sort of visuals. Yeah. So that's a misconception that I come across a lot with clients, is that that actually they are having experiences, but they're just not understand it, or they've got a misconception about how they should be experiencing something. So that the information is still there. It's just they're trying to access it in a way that's not particularly natural to them to do so. Yeah.
And this is what you say there is relevant when people are trying to communicate with their spirit guides as well, because some people feel they spend so much time trying to see their spirit guides, but if they're more of a kinesthetic person and not a very visual person, then it's the kinesthetic area that they need to be focusing on.
Yeah.
So
and the
they're
more
trying to see, and that can lower their vibration because they're getting frustrated, and it kind of takes them away from where they're trying to go.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to vibration, energy, and how sensitive you are to that. And that's something that we have to learn. You know, the more we do it through meditation, the more we start to understand what different frequencies feel like. So when you do get, like, you know, an angelic presence in the room, you will feel that as a different vibration, and you'll be able to, and, you know, recognize it as being angelic, as opposed to something else that may be not as, you know, on a lower vibration, you know, an earthbound soul, you know, which we haven't got time to sort of, maybe we'll need to do
another talk.
Yeah. I mean, you know, maybe we'll do a kind of a live or something sometime and get people to come and join us and ask questions. So so there's one last question that Rebecca asked, and she said, do we agree a set time limit when we return, say 63 years old, or is it flexible once we're here? And do you believe memories and experiences of past life and learning from the past lives is fully accessible to us while we're here? We touched on that anyway, didn't we? With sort of like it's what's
they potentially are. I mean, the memories are, if it's appropriate, you know, inappropriate, that stuff that would spoil the life experience that you're having, then you'd be shielded from that. You wouldn't have access to it, whether it's like a life between lives or a past
the answers
life.
To the test bit, isn't it?
Yeah, it kind of, you know, we put a lot of energy into incarnating, and it's a very cherished, valuable thing for us as souls. We don't want to spoil that.
Yeah.
You know, although we might want to just throw the towel in and say, I've had enough, this is crazy, I don't want to be doing this.
I've said that a few times. Yeah.
What, you said I chose it, you're mad.
So what about the sort of, you know, do we have, you know, have we decided that whatever happens, we're checking out at age 60 or 70 or 80?
I mean,
do we have an expiration date?
What I mean, there's a few varying views on this, but it would seem mostly that we have windows throughout our life that are potential stepping off points, as it were. And those windows, we can take them or not take them depending on how we've developed and how well we've done with our life challenges, or the you know, I mean, we talk about life challenges as if that's the only reason we come here, but we also come here to enjoy the experience as well. You know, it's a very
you don't go to the restaurant and then not eat all the lovely dishes on offer, do you?
No, but if you're a vegan and you get there and there's no vegan options, you go, oh well, I'm in the wrong place, aren't I? I might as well leave because I'm hungry, you know. But I get the distinct impression, at least anyway, I can't answer this question 100%. I don't particularly know for sure, but it certainly seems that we have windows, and when we get close to those windows, we have a choice whether we feel that we've fulfilled what we want to fulfill, whether we're had enough, or we want to continue. Or maybe the challenge is too much and we've got the option to step off, or maybe you know, we're going to go with this. I know it's difficult, but I want to see it through to the end this time, because you know, I've been trying to do this for a while and I've got this far, let's just do it. You know, that's the impression I get from speaking to my clients and what other therapists have talked
And of course,
about.
there's a difference, isn't there, between, you know, our soul selves and our ego self. I mean, the ego is there so that we, you know, it is our survival instinct. The ego is part of our survival instinct.
Part of being
just like any animal has, you know, it has the survival instinct. So, you know, so looking at it from an ego level, then we'll never want to go. You know, unless we, you know, unless we're finding it so hard that we'd like to. But then even then it comes into question, is that why some people attempt suicide and aren't successful at it? You know, because their soul is saying, no, actually, you know, this isn't one of the designated drop-off points, you know.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also, I mean, talking to people that may have experienced someone close to them commit suicide, I think it's important for them to understand that spirit often and many times, as much as they can, have made it clear that everything that could have been done to stop that person finishing their life at that point has been done. Because obviously, if someone commits suicide, again, it's that blame. If only I'd have been there for that person more. If only I'd have done this, if only I'd have done that. You know, spirit,
anger, isn't it? There's a lot of anger sometimes towards people that, you know, how could you have left me? How could you have done this to me? You know, so yeah, it's. But I think you're right. From what I know and have experienced, that nobody goes out before they want to on a soul level, but you know, we find that really difficult to get our heads around at a human level.
I mean, there's the other side to suicide. You know, in some tribes, you know, when the old person was old and was a burden to the family, they would say goodbye and walk off into the snow. Now that's a different kind of suicide. You know, that's different. But when someone commits suicide because it's too much, you know, their life challenges are too much. That's the soul is struggling to cope with the challenges that they're faced with. But those challenges are important to that soul. It's a real important part of their soul's journey. That's a different thing.
So would you say that what's happening in that situation is that the soul is saying, we'll just abort this one and have a rethink, because, you know, I can't see you kind of, you know, I can't see you getting around it. You know, it's kind of like you've got to a block that you can't seem to.
Yeah, sure, but maybe the intention is to go take it that far. Maybe the intention is to die in that certain way. Maybe the intention is to really have that dark night of the soul, because the learning that is required is only going to be obtainable from that space for that particular soul. You know, a lot of the time it's rare that we're aware of that soul's journey and what experiences and past lives that soul's had.
Yeah, you know? That's really important, isn't it? Because you know, one of the things that I really have learned in this work is that nobody can judge another soul's path. You know, we can only kind of work on how we experience our lives and how we deal with things and how we perceive things from our own point of view. And we can't blame, shame, judge another soul's path, even, you know, doesn't matter how difficult, you know, we find to explain things away. Just going back to the death window thing, it's I'd just like to quickly share that I had this experience in 2018. It was July 2018, and I had a 2-week period where I'd done a huge amount of spiritual growth and inner work, and I'd kind of like had a bit of a eureka, kind of reached the top of the hill moment, you know, and I knew that energetically I'd really got something, you know, I'd really learned a lesson that I'd been struggling with for you know, for many, many years. And which was euphoric. But then I went through this kind of 2-week period where it felt like I was going to die. And it was really scary. You know, I thought, I kept, you know, my heart was doing strange things and I just didn't feel well. You know, I felt like I could just you know, keel over or something. And and it was really quite scary, and I was scared. And but when I went into meditation, I kind of went, you know, again, you know, calming that the conscious ego mind down and getting into the heart center. What I felt was that actually I it's almost like this was the end of the first bit of my life, or the kind of all the karmic stuff. And now I had the free choice, the, you know, to stay and almost like completely swap contracts, or swap what the, you know, what the focus was. And it was almost like my soul was kind of like, brilliant, you've done it, you've got there, you can come home if you like, and or you can stay. But if you
do you want to do the bonus level?
or you could stay. But if you stay, and I want you to understand this, and it was very kind of clear in my meditation, was if you stay, then you have got to be a service to, you know, kind of like the ascension process, and, you know, of service to other souls, sort of. So it was more kind of like I'd done my personal stuff, and it was kind of like, if I wanted to stay, then it was almost like, well, you have to dedicate your life now, in, you know, to stepping into sort of the spiritual service side of it. So but the really weird thing was that obviously the human me, the ego me, didn't want to go anywhere. But I was aware that there was this kind of almost like a conversation going on between my higher self, my soul, my guides, you know, kind of, and I was, in some ways, I wasn't part of the conversation. It was like, well, I'll take your, you know, I'll take your feelings into account, but so it's almost like there was this bit of waiting period,
a bit of replanning, which is kind of what I was touching on earlier when we were talking about soul contact.
But what interests me, and this has only just occurred to me as we've been talking, was I came to you in, well, actually, it was around about the same time that I first met you, but I came for my Life Between Life reading in November of that year. So July, August. So that's 3 months later. So it's almost like I'd agreed to carry on, stay on earth.
Then things changed.
And then I came to, you know, my Life Between Life with Yous, which is sort of, you know, all the information that came through in that session was very much about where I'm supposed to be going now, and you know, why I'm here doing what I'm doing. So that's really interesting. So that to me was an obvious death window, if you see what I mean.
I've heard many people tell similar stories about this sort of death window thing. It's an interesting subject, isn't it? It's like, wow, so we have natural windows that are lined up, that when we get there, it's like, are you ready now? Oh, I'm not sure.
Maybe the impression I got, or the knowing that I had, wasn't that it was nothing to do with what age I was chronologically. It was when I'd learned that lesson. And when I'd reached a certain
so it wasn't that the death window was attached to a particular date in time. It was more of a certain level of attunement or achievement or experience for you as Ange that then released. And that makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, it's not
because I could have done it at 18 or 28 or 32. It didn't matter the chronological age. And actually, around about that same time, I remember having a really vivid dream as well, where I could hear my guides talking, and somebody said, "Oh, well, she's got till she's 73." So we'll see.
So if this death window you spoke of happened at 73, you'd probably be like, if that's the case, let's just do this, shall we? Otherwise I've got to do all that work.
what makes it more intriguing to me is that, you know, I've spoken to numerologists and astrologists, you know, and I'm into numerology and astrology and all that sort of stuff. And my numerology chart, the phase of life that I'm going into now, and is, you know, the numerology attached to it is all about being a teacher and stepping out and helping others, that kind of spiritual path. So it is very spiritual and teacher orientated. So it is interesting that all these things tend to sort of come together, and you get all of these little you know, notes for self kind of thing. You know,
I kind of remember you being a teacher in, there's a scene where you were teaching in your Life Between Lives.
Yes, yes, I was teaching. Well, I was with young souls, so souls that hadn't had many lives on earth, and had kind of maybe overreached themselves a bit. So we were having a kind of I was kind of the advanced one there, but it wasn't so much a sort of teacher and children, but it was kind of like facilitating a conversation with these young souls about where maybe they bit off more than they could chew, and
you know? I've done that before, so I can tell you all about it.
yeah. But you see, all of my numerology and astrology pushes me. It says that I should be a teacher, a spiritual teacher of some kind, and that's something that the ego side, the human side of me, has always been in resistance to. You know, which brings up my communication
belief, and that's all about that, isn't it? Yeah.
So it's almost like I gave myself all of these blockages and all these challenges around communication and being a communicator to see whether I could still overcome that and become a teacher in whatever way, shape, or form I chose to do it. So and when you start, you know, and we can all do this in our lives, can't we? We can all sit in meditation and see, you know, be shown all these little bits and breadcrumbs or jigsaw pieces, or however you want to sort of see them. We will all have those kind of, and although it's easy to look back in hindsight, you know, we can all see where we've taken particular turns, or particular people came into our lives at a particular time that might have seemed random, but actually when you look in hindsight, it's like, oh my God, that was divine timing, that that we met at that time and we did this. And I don't believe there's any wrong turns either. I think that our soul GPS just reroutes the routes. So
you know, I think there's another important learning that can be taken from that, which is what I wanted to touch on earlier when we were talking about, when you was asking about how does, you know, how souls could meet, and how, you know, because there's this in Life Between Lives. Sometimes if you ask people when they've talked about some of the soul contracts they've set with people, or the desire to connect with certain people to have experiences, it's like, how will you know? How will you connect with this person? It's like, oh, they're going to have a certain way of being that's going to stand out to my subconscious mind that I won't be aware of, which will pull me in, that will connect me, you know, or there's going to be a certain thing, a certain coincidence that's going to bring us together. And bringing that out into our conscious awareness, into this conversation, I think it's a beautiful thing to consider, because, you know, when you take people that say are struggling to meet someone and have a meaningful relationship, you know, and they're going on dating sites and they're trying everything they can try. It's like, well, the person that you're meant to be with is the person you're meant to be with, and maybe there's going to be some people that will be for a couple of weeks, and there'll be some people that are meant for a couple of years or a couple of decades or whatever it is, but that is already been decided by you and them. But what is stopping you is you getting to that space, that window of when you can accept it and bring it into your life. So there's work you need to be doing on yourself to get yourself orientated so that you're ready to meet with that person. But that will happen, you know. So that, I think, can be a useful realization for people, because they go, okay, I need to kind of settle down here and realize that I'm going to meet the person that I'm going to meet and the people I'm going to meet, whatever happens, as long as I can get myself sorted in the way that I intend to sort, you know, to do the work on myself. So working on yourself becomes the most important thing. And again, we were talking about this, switching it round from being a victim. It's like, oh, there's no good people out there for me, or why do I never find anyone, to going, okay, I'm not quite in the space yet where I'm ready to connect. I need to do some work on myself, and this is important. This is important for me. This is important for my soul. Or I've chosen to spend a large part of this life on my own so I can experience this from this perspective, and this is important to me. All of those can be possibilities that someone could explore.
Yeah. And what fascinates me is that you can often see that energetically in their charts, numerologically or astrology, you know. So
it shows, because
you know, when we've incarnated, we incarnate that, you know, at a particular time, at a particular day, to have an energetic blueprint, if you like, that sort of the planets and the energies match up to what you're wanting to, you know, to carry the ingredients that you want, you know, to use this life. So,
as they say, it's written in the stars, is the phrase, isn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, of course, it's, you know, it's the more you look into it, the more it makes sense. I think that's the thing. I mean, people dismiss and poo-poo things like, you know, astrology, because they've only really come across it as, you know, the little thing in the back of the Sun newspaper or whatever, you know, which of course is rubbish, you know, of course it is. But when you start looking into quantum physics and the science behind, you know, energetics and frequency, and how, you know, how these planets have, you know, an energetic pull, or, you know, effect on other planets, and this planet and the moon with the tides, you know, is an obvious example. And yeah, then you start to have to think, is there more? Is there more to all this stuff, you know? Yeah. So we've been going 2 hours.
Oh wow, okay. Maybe we can
we're just getting into it now.
Part 1 and part 2, maybe.
Yeah.
I think we'd end up running over there, Anne, really.
But you know, I'm so passionate about this subject. I know you are as well, and that's why we, you know, whenever we have a talk, it's never 5 minutes, is it? And yeah, because I mean, this is so expansive. You can't cover it all, can you? It is a never-ending conversation.
We've so not really covered everything as well. We've just touched on, and you asked me the question to sort of explain the process as we go through Life Between Lives, and I don't think we got past the dying stage very far, did we? We haven't even touched on soul groups or the Council of Elders or anything like that, you know. Yeah. It is vast.
Definitely. And so I mean, I'll put this up, and obviously I'll post it in the Soul Collective group and see what feedback we get. And if people want us to do another one, then that's great. And
yeah, that'd be great. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. So just I'll tell people listening, rather, because I already know, where you're based and what services you offer, and your website will be put onto your face, so you don't have to say that.
So yeah, I'm based in Webley in Herefordshire. This is my therapy room, although I do also work online. I do Life Between Lives online. I prefer to do them one-to-one. But I have had some great results working online, actually. It's usually I have a good chat with the client first to make sure it's feasible. So I do past life regression for exploration and for therapy. I do psychotherapy. I do energy release work, spirit release work, and space clearing.
But people can call on you to go to their houses, and
yeah, sometimes people have sort of poltergeist activity that sometimes can be quite serious and disruptive for them, you know. And so sometimes it requires me actually going to the property and working actually directly on site to clear the energy. I also do spirit release work, which is usually people come to me. I tend not to do too much of that online. I prefer to actually be able to connect with the person, though also I can do that online if needed. And I do a lot of inner child work. So with from a therapeutic aspect, when somebody wants to resolve something, often it's not known where it started, and sometimes it can be a childhood experience that hasn't been understood fully or has been forgotten. And interestingly, the childhood and our current lives often mirror our past lives as well. So a childhood trauma can also be very similar to traumas that have been experienced in past lives as well. So it's almost like the childhood aspect of it is giving us another opportunity to work through something that still needs to be resolved. So it can be approached from both ways, depending. So yeah, that's where my passion lies, really, is working with the energy. So I do traditional psychotherapy and use counselling techniques, but really I find the best work and the most powerful changes come when we're working with the subconscious mind.
Yeah.
Because we can really make some really big positive changes that way. But as I say, it's not all about the therapy. There can be quite a lot of exploration.
And for anybody that's still with us after 2 hours, because you're totally bored with the subject, the good news is that me and you work together as well, don't we? So we past life workshops.
So we do workshops, and we used to, before the whole restrictions, we were doing quite a lot of combined sound bath guided, spiritual guided journeys, which I enjoyed very much, and I look forward to that becoming something we can get back into in the future.
Definitely. And so the past life regression workshops, they're whole day workshops, aren't they? So we cover an awful lot. So you can just rock up not knowing anything about incarnations or anything about this subject, and you'll go away with lots of lots of knowledge and also some great experiences. So if anybody's watching, we will be doing those again. I think we have got 2 spots left, I think, for June the 26th, which is our advanced past life regression. That's really aimed at people that are already already familiar with past life regression or have had past life, and they want to do more of the life between life journey, don't they? But we'll put some more dates up quite soon, now that it looks like restrictions are sort of lifting. So I think that's all we've got time for, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Leon, for taking this time out for me today, and hopefully people have got a lot of great information and lots of things to think about, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's personal exploration. So going away and thinking about it, and obviously, we're both here if you want to get in touch with us through emails, and so I'll put both of our websites on the bottom when I post this, so people will know where to get to. And for anybody who wants to join the Soul Collective on Facebook, just put Soul Collective into the search bar on Facebook and it'll just come up. It's a really, really safe place for anybody that's on a spiritual journey, and you can be a beginner or you can be advanced. We've got everybody in between, so everybody is really supportive. We do remote healings. Some of the readers go lives and do mini tarot readings and things like that, but it's all comes from a place of love and heart-centered space. So there's no ego or control sort of competition stuff getting in. So if that appeals to you, then come and join us on the Soul Collective. We'd love to see you. So thank you, Leon, and I'm sure we will be doing this again, because like I said, it's just a vast subject and we just scratched the surface. So thank you. Bye.